There is a big difference between a good mix and a great mix. Now, a great mix can bring out all the sonic character in your song, but most importantly, it can portray the emotion that you want the listener to feel. Now, when I started mixing and mastering, I just fell into the habit of doing whatever I saw on the last tutorial I watched. Cutting the low end here, over compressing this, just because a certain tutorial said that that's what I should do. That is until I understood this one concept. So in this video, we're gonna go over what that concept is and 2 ways that I apply it both in mixing and mastering on almost every single one of my projects. So when it comes to audio production, we have to consider everything that we have at our disposal as a tool. We have instruments to create the melody and play the chords. We have the voice to convey the message and emotion to the listener. We have then plugins such as compressors, limiters, EQs to sculpt and shape the sound exactly how we want. But we also have our speakers, and I think speakers are often an overlooked tool inside of the studio. Yes, they're there so we can hear exactly what we're doing, but we have to consider that speaker a tool. If you think about a carpenter, they have specific tools for specific jobs, such as a drill to screw in screws, a hammer to hammer in nails. And our speakers are meant to play back the sound as efficiently as possible. Now, once I understood the concept of speaker efficiency, it really changed the way I considered mixing and mastering. Now, when we look at a frequency spectrum, we only have a limited amount of space for all these frequencies to coexist together. And we're asking the speaker to recreate all those different frequencies. But if we're not asking it in the right way, it really reduces the speaker's efficiency. So that can lead to muddy mixes, smeared stereo images and stereo field, and also just not getting the most out of our speaker when it comes down to volume and clarity. So let's jump into our DAW and see these 2 ways that we can maximize our speaker efficiency to help you get the most out of your mixing and your mastering. So here we are inside of Ableton taking a look at the first scenario where we're trying to maximize our speaker efficiency. This song, an amazing artist, Michaela Monet. The link is going to be in the description if you want to check out the full version of the song. But the 2 primary elements in the song are a vocal and a piano, which happen to share a very similar frequency range. And we're asking our speaker to play back both of those at the same time. So we have to tell the speaker essentially which sound source to prioritize. So the vocal is almost 99% of the time the dominant sound source, and we're gonna have to tell the piano to get out of the way when that vocal is playing so the speaker can play back as efficiently as possible. So in order to accomplish this, we're gonna use a technique of sidechaining. It's not your standard sidechaining, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell the piano to duck out of the way of the vocal at a specific frequency range and a specific part of our stereo field. What we're trying to do is get the piano to wrap around. So if we were to close our eyes and listen to the song, we would essentially see that Michaela Monet, the singer, is sitting directly in front of us and the piano is essentially wrapping around her. In this scenario, I'm going to use the Pro MB by FabFilter. So let's throw that onto our piano track right here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is sidechain, essentially sending the signal, the vocal, to trigger this multi-band compressor on the piano. So inside of Ableton, you just select vocal right here. You can do this in pretty much any single DAW out there on the market, and you can also do this with other multi-band compressors. I just happen to use the FabFilter Pro MB because it's quick and efficient. So the first thing we're going to want to ask ourselves, well, where's the frequency range of this vocal? So let's go over into the vocal track where we just have an EQ. So when we play back this vocal, we're essentially using the EQ just for a visual representation of the dominant frequency of this vocal. Let's play it back. Era el centro en la galaxia para ti, y ahora giras. So since she is in her lower register for this song, I'm seeing a lot of her vocal is coming down here around 200. And most of the body is coming up here around 600. So in order to get that to cut through the piano, here's what we're gonna do. Let's go over to the piano, and I'm going to make a point right here at about, let's say 650. I don't want to affect too many things around it, so I'm gonna tighten up my slope. Inside FabFilter Pro MB, you simply double click and you can tighten up the slope right here. And since I have the vocal sending over to the piano, I need to tell this node to be triggered specifically by the vocal. Inside of Pro MB, the way we're going to do that is we're going to click on expert mode right here, and we want to tell it to listen to the external source. So now if we play this back, we're going to bring our threshold down. So now what we can see is every time the vocal happens, it's going to be side chaining the piano on that specific frequency band. So we're not affecting the lows of the piano or the highs of the piano, just specifically where that vocal needs to cut through the mix. We could stop right here and say, okay, this is going to help if we A-B this and play this back. I'm going to over-exaggerate the settings just so you can hear audibly what it's doing. So. And then without that sidechain compression on that specific frequency, the vocal doesn't quite cut through the piano as it should. Now the vocal is essentially sitting right on top, but what's happening here is we're ducking the entire piano frequency. We just want to duck the stereo image in the mid as if she's sitting at the center of the piano playing the piano. So we're going to come down here to the lower right, and we're going to take this slider, which is at 100% stereo right now, and just slide it up so it's only affecting the mids. And what's happening here is when the piano is playing back in our stereo field, it's ducking only in the center, only in the mid of the stereo field, but only at that specific frequency where her vocal needs to pop through the piano. So let's take a listen to how this sounds now. And of course, we are over-exaggerating the amount of compression just so we can hear how the effect is on the piano. So now what we're hearing is we're hearing the mid of the stereo image duck at her specific vocal frequency range, hence wrapping the piano around her voice as if she's sitting in the center of the piano playing it back. And also we're allowing the speaker to focus on her vocal frequency predominantly in the center of the mix field and allow the piano still to live on the sides. Now, to even exaggerate this effect even more, what we could do is we could add a little expansion to the sides to really bring the piano 100% around her. And again, in this scenario, we are over exaggerating these settings just to show the effect, but it would look something like this. So now we essentially have a high shelf right here. We're going to change this to expansion, but we want to over-exaggerate the piano on the sides of our image. So we're going to go over here and change this to side and go 100% side, and then start to raise this up in order to boost the high frequencies of the piano on the sides of our stereo image. So now let's listen to how it sounded before and then how it sounds with this method implemented. So bypass it. This is how it sounded before. So with this method, we're not asking the speaker to play back all the frequencies across the entire 180-degree stereo field all at the same time. We're saying, hey, in the middle of our stereo field, focus on the vocal frequencies, and then on the sides of it, focus on the frequencies of the piano that we want to bring out. Now, this doesn't just have to be used with a vocal or a piano. You can also use it with guitars, or if there are specific instruments that you want to sit on top of another instrument, but you don't want to lose that stereo field, you can pretty much get creative and route anything to anything else where you need it to really share that frequency spectrum, but not just the frequency spectrum, also the stereo field and where the placement is with those specific elements. So in this next scenario, what we have is a track that's pretty much mixed, and we're going to be getting ready to master it. And this technique is the thing that I do very first on my mastering chain in 99.9% of the songs that I'm mastering. So this is a track called Happy Pills, produced by myself, featuring an artist named Chris Collins. It's not released, but we're going to give it a little sneak peek so we can show you what we would do to master this track. And if we just have a quick listen, we can see that this is a very bass-heavy track.
Drink until we all fall down.
Happy pills that feel fantastic.
Drink until we
So we've already used the technique from the previous example where the bass is going to be sidechained to the kick. So every time the kick hits, the bass is going to duck at a specific frequency space and only in the mid of our stereo field. However, this leaves a lot of bass information on the sides for the speakers to have to recreate. So let's look at what we could put on the master channel in order to eliminate some of that stress on our speakers while they're playing back the song. For this scenario, we're going to use the Pro Q3, but I'll also show you how to do it with the stock Ableton EQ right after this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a node that's going to cut the lows, and we're going to put more of a steeper slope on it, because what we're doing here is we're going to want to cut the lows to around 25 to 30. This is just information that the speaker doesn't need. The speaker is not going to be recreating those super subharmonics. Even a massive club, typically around 30 to 25 and below, you're just asking the speaker to pump out more information that's really needed. So in order to make sure that we're only cutting this in the mid, we're going to come over here and just change this to mid, meaning that now we're cutting the low end in the mid at this specific frequency. The speakers can breathe a little bit in the mid of the stereo field. So let's play the drop first without the EQ as it was. So now let's cut the low in the mid of the stereo field. And if you're listening in headphones or a good set of studio monitors, you're going to hear that bass comes a little bit more alive because the speaker is able to recreate it more efficiently. But we can take it even farther. We're going to go in and add a second cut here for the sides. We're going to do less of a slope, low cut. And we can even be a little bit more gentle with this one. We're going to keep it right at about 90 and then change this only to our sides. So now what we have here in this EQ is we have a low cut for the mid of our stereo field, cutting out unwanted bass frequencies. And then for the sides on your stereo field, we're eliminating even more bass so they don't have to worry about it. And that will allow all of your high frequencies, your vocals, and everything else to really shine on the sides of your mix. So let's play this without, and then we'll bring it in halfway through. So if you have good reference to listen to this through, what you should hear is just more definition of the individual elements. When we start cutting the low in the mid and then the lows also on the sides, we're going to hear a little bit more of that low-end frequency punch through on the speakers, but we're also going to hear a little bit more of the high frequencies get lifted up on the sides. But you don't need Pro Q3 to do this. You can also do it with a stock plugin. So now we have the stock EQ inside of Ableton, and let's take a look how we can do the same trick with that. So the very first cut we want to make is right around 30 to 25. And we could adjust the slope if we want. Just for the speed of this, we're just going to leave it at where it is right now with that gentle slope. And if we come over here, we're going to change this to mid side and make sure that we're 100% on the mid right here. Now, if we add a second one for the sides, what we're going to want to do is change this over to our side right here, turn this on, bring it up to our 90. And now we've essentially recreated the exact same effect with the stock plugin. So in the mid of the stereo image, we're cutting around 30 to 25. And then on the sides, we're cutting around 90 to allow all the highs to come up on the sides in the stereo field. Now you can do this with almost any stock plugin that has mid-side, and it should allow your speakers to work more efficiently, bringing more life and more volume to your mix without having to do a lot of work. This is the first thing I put in all my mastering chains, and stay tuned, we're gonna actually master a full track in future videos. So I hope the concept of speaker efficiency and those two tips helped you understand how you can get the most out of your mixes and your masters. Now, if you like this sort of content, please like and comment below. We have a ton more content planned around mixing and mastering coming up soon. My name is Stu. This is Create, Educate, and Inspire. Hope you learned something. And on that note, I'll see you on the next one.